The Albanese government is approving a 100-turbine wind farm on Robbins Island on the northwest of Tasmania. The facility will be the largest in the state, generating up to 900 megawatts of power. The minister confirmed the project's approval. It was delayed 7 times by his predecessor, Tanya Plibersek. Minister Watt announcing protections for the local wildlife.
I have attached very strong environmental conditions because we recognise that the area this wind farm is situated in is of very great environmental significance. It has important populations of critically endangered species, including some bird species, also endangered species such as Tasmanian devils.
That was Murray Watt then. Here he is now on this project. So 7 times delayed under Tanya Plibersek. Was she sort of sitting on this?
No, I don't think so, Tom. I mean, I think the reality is this is a very complex project and if not managed correctly, it would have significant impacts, and we wanted to make sure that we were managing environmental impacts in a way that ensured that the critical species involved are here forever.
Which I'll talk about in a moment, but in a few months you approve it. She was on it for 3 years. Is there a sense that you're, more pragmatic as a minister?
No, I think what it came down to is that many of the decisions to postpone the project, and I'll fess up, I did one of them myself a few weeks ago. I delayed the final decision-making time for this project a few weeks ago because we did at different times, both under me and under Tanya, need to request additional information from the company proposing this project so that we could be sure.
So protections in place, there's a migratory bird, for example. What happens if the protections are not working? Given the size of the project and the cost, it's just bad luck bird, isn't it?
Well, we believe that the conditions that we've attached, 88 conditions, including a number that go well beyond what the Tasmanian government imposed themselves, are the way to ensure that this project can occur in a way that's not going to have unacceptable impacts on those species.
Some will die, but the species will be okay. Is that the reality here?
No,
There's no such thing as zero?
What we're seeking to do is to avoid impacts on those critically endangered species by putting in place those different conditions.
So there'll be zero impact?
Well, I'm not going to give a guarantee about exactly the numbers involved.
But your conditions are set if it works according to what you think, zero impact.
We would certainly be hoping and expecting to see no impact on these critically endangered species, and that's why we've attached those conditions. But also, in fact, when it comes to something like the orange-bellied parrot, which is a critically endangered species in Australia, it's encouraging to see that population has actually grown in recent years, still not at very high levels. Yeah. And what we actually want to see through these conditions is that population grow rather than shrink.
The reality is, for some mining projects, if something's happening with the local flora or fauna, you can adjust things. You can't, once this is built, it's built, right? It's expensive, it's part of our energy mix. So if the conditions don't work out as planned, there's nothing you can do at that point, is there?
No, I wouldn't agree with that. I mean, you will have seen that some of the conditions that we've imposed, again, beyond what the Tasmanian government did, was to require the company to put forward before construction and before commissioning things like management plans for how they...
But I'm saying once it's up and going...
What I was going to say is that those management plans, for example, allow the capacity to shut down some of the turbines at particular times of the year. The Tasmanian government, when they granted approval for this project, actually said that it would need to shut down for 5 months a year, every year. That got overturned on appeal through the courts. What we've said is there needs to be a plan, and one of the outcomes of that plan may be that there's a temporary pause in those wind turbines. So
making it even less reliable as a power source.
Well, the proponent has agreed to these conditions and believes that they're workable. I think a 5-month shutdown would have been more difficult for them. And as I say, the court overturned that. But we're confident that these conditions do achieve that environmental outcome, while also, of course, delivering the energy that we need for the future.
We've had a fairly hostile reaction to the Prime Minister and Victorian Premier at the Bush Summit. Is your sense that there is a growing number of people in regional Australia concerned about large-scale projects in their backyard?
Oh, look, I wouldn't put it that way. I don't think it's a surprise that when the Prime Minister of the country turns up in a regional town, that he gets a friendly and an unfriendly welcome from different constituents. But
quite a number here that you're not happy with.
Sure.
You don't think there's any increase, because the projects are ramping up, whether the overall sentiment is positive or negative, wouldn't it make sense for concern to be increasing as well as projects actually start getting rolled out?
My experience, including when I was the Agriculture Minister, is that in some communities these projects are welcomed more than in other communities. But, just as we do see protests from people opposing these projects, I have met many farmers over the years who are making reliable, substantial income from hosting these kinds of projects themselves or even being neighbouring to those projects. So, we often see those who are against a project, and let's face it, that makes better TV. But there are also substantial numbers of people in regional communities who are benefiting from this and support these kind of projects.
So you believe there's still strong support overall in the communities these projects are in?
Look, I would say there's mixed support, and there are some communities where it's stronger than others. There are some communities I know who are dead against these kind of projects happening. There are other communities I've been to where there's support for it. Often what that comes down to is the way the particular company has consulted the community beforehand. Generally speaking, when a company goes to the trouble of communicating and consulting the community, they don't get the kind of backlash that you see in other places. So there's an incentive there for companies to do the right thing, and it'll make it easier for them to get their projects accepted.
Where are we at on the EPBC?
Well, I'd say we're making good progress. I've had some more discussions today with various stakeholders about that.
Coalition or Greens, the more likely path?
We're open to either.
What's the more likely path right now?
Look, I think both of them are open. Both of them are making encouraging
So you are
statements.
having ongoing conversations with both of them?
I spoke recently to the shadow environment spokesperson for the Coalition and for the Greens. I'll be doing that again before too long. I've made clear to them, as I have to others, that we're open to doing a deal with either side of politics. I'd like to see a situation where everyone supports this.
On which side are there fewer issues to iron out?
Well, I would say there are different issues on each side.
I would say
rather
that's
than
fairly obvious.
fewer.
You must have a sense of which one will be...
No, look, what I'd say more broadly is that, first of all, there are some encouraging comments coming through. Susan Lee on the one hand, Larissa Waters on the other hand, about the need for these reforms to occur. They've obviously said they're not going to sign a blank cheque. They need to be satisfied with the detail, and we'll keep consulting that with them. But the point I keep making is that mining companies, big business, small business, environmental groups all say our current laws are broken, and whether you're the Liberal Party or the Greens Party, I would have thought that'd be worth listening to.
The main obvious one seems to be any sort of climate trigger, which the Greens want.
Yep.
You won't consider that at all.
Well,
You'll never consider overall emissions, global emissions, when deciding whether to open a coal mine. That's the case?
Well, what I've said is, we are still that's one of the issues that we're still consulting on is how climate, and if at all, gets recognised in this Act. What I've said is that we lean more towards the recommendation Graham Samuel made in his review, which was that projects should be required to disclose the Scope 1 and 2 emissions that they will generate and an abatement plan, rather than putting in place a climate trigger. And one of the reasons for that, apart from the fact that's what Graham recommended, was that we already have a range of climate measures in place, the safeguards mechanism, our emissions targets. So, for example,
the safeguards mechanism doesn't really touch the sides when the coal's being exported, does it?
It focuses on the emissions that are generated in Australia from those projects.
Which is negligible compared to the burning of the coal.
It depends on the case.
Offshore.
But the other point is that Australia, along with well over 100 other countries, has agreed to manage our emissions through the Paris Agreement, which means we're responsible for the emissions that occur in Australia, and other companies
could
are responsible
that mean
for their
setting
emissions.
something up where you need to abate a certain % of the emissions regardless of where they burnt, for example? Is that what
I wouldn't... as I say, we are having ongoing discussions with people about this point, but we are leaning much more towards what Graham Samuel has recommended.
So some element of needing to have abatement on a project.
What I've said is...
And that's not just domestically, that's a separate issue.
No, I haven't gone that far. What I've said is that Graham's recommendation was that there should be disclosure of emissions and a plan to abate, setting out what you are going to do.
If your plan's like, here's a plan, we're not going to do it, does that mean you don't get approval?
Well, depending on the emissions coming from your project, you may well be subject to the safeguards mechanism.
But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where it's being used overseas.
But it is the responsibility of the countries we export coal and gas to.
So that
to
you
manage
don't need a plan on how you're going to abate emissions when it's overseas. It's a plan for domestic, to clarify on that.
That is the way we are leaning. Yeah, because as I say, I mean, just as we need to account for the emissions from cars imported from other countries that are used here, those countries that we export those products to are required to account for the emissions that come from Australian products that are sent there.
Murray Watt, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.